Hi, my name is Kishore Borra. I'm working with Microsoft Technologies last 10 years. In the design pattern series, today I'm going to demonstrate you a very simple and widely used pattern called Observer Pattern. If you like this presentation, you can follow the other videos in my personal blog kborra.wordpress.com. Okay, let's get started. Here is the agenda for today's presentation. We're going to understand what is an observer pattern, and then we will try to see where and when exactly we can make use of the observer pattern or go for the implementation of observer pattern. And then we will see different flavors of observer pattern, namely the traditional observer pattern given by gang of 4, and then some of the advanced versions of the observer pattern which are already available and present in Microsoft.NET framework, namely events and delegates, iObservable and iObserver interfaces. I'm going to explain these different flavors of observer pattern with the help of a sample code, which is what I'm going to cover under demo session. And then finally we will consolidate our learnings about observer pattern. We know that design patterns are solutions to software design problems which we will find time and again in real world application development. Patterns are all about creating reusable designs, and we know that the design patterns have been classified into 3 different categories, namely creational patterns, structural patterns, behavioral patterns. The name itself will indicate that the creational patterns are all about dealing with object creation mechanisms. They'll help you to create objects that are suitable to a given situation. When it comes to structural patterns, they are aimed at easing the design by identifying simple ways and means to realize the relationship between entities. And finally, behavioral patterns. These are all about addressing the common communication issues between different objects. And to start with, observer pattern is a behavioral pattern, which means this is one of the pattern which we will use to overcome the common communication issues between different sets of objects. Okay, and the other name for observer pattern is publisher subscriber pattern. Maybe this name might be quite familiar to you all, and you will very easily relate it. We all know what is a publisher and subscriber setup. Okay, let's consider. Let's not get into the definition. Let's try to understand. By taking a typical example. You all know about the conventional postal delivery system, right? So whenever you have a mail, postman would come and deliver the same to you. Instead, imagine you going to the post office every day to check whether there are any mails to you. It means a really inefficient system, since each individual need to go to the post office and check for his mails periodically. Okay, so here the post office is called the subject or publisher. So the other name for publisher is subject. So here post office is a subject or publisher, and we are observers. Okay, so you are an observer. And then what does an observer need to do? The observer need to subscribe with the publisher, means you need to notify yourself, you need to subscribe yourself with your local post office. So the publisher is post office, and publisher or subject is post office, and yourself will be considered as an observer or subscriber, and the observer or subscriber need to subscribe or register with the publisher or subject called post office. Let's take another example. Like, in Twitter, what do? We follow different actors and politicians or musicians, and there those are called the subject, and consider yourself as an observer. And when your subject, means your favorite actor or politician, when they tweet, what happens? We will get an update. Why? Because we have subscribed to them. So here also you can see the need for an observer pattern. So here also you have the publisher subscriber mechanism. Whenever there is some change in the subject, it is being notified to all the observers who have got registered or subscribed to know the changes that are happening in the publisher. For example, we can go on and on. For example, you can go for an YouTube channel, and then whenever somebody posts a video in the YouTube channel, all the registered users will get notifications, and along with the users, maybe there might be some paid moderators by YouTube, and they will also get notifications because they will be verifying your content to see if it is violating any of the copyright infringement act. So that is another example. Okay, so now let's go back to the definition here, and as I mentioned, it is a behavioral pattern, and it is also known as a publisher subscriber pattern. And here the important there are certain important terms like subject and observer. You have subject, you have observers. Okay, so you have observers. And now you read it. The observer pattern is a software design pattern in which an object called the subject maintains the list of its dependents called observers and notifies them automatically of any state changes, usually by calling one of their methods. Now if you see here, what is happening is the observer need to register with the subject or subscribe to the subject. Okay, obviously when you are subscribing, you should also have the provision to unregister or unsubscribe, which means this would make it very clear to us the subject we should need to provide a mechanism for all the observers to register themselves with the subject and also unregister themselves. Okay, and also it maintains the list of the subject maintains the list of all the dependent objects which are interested in the changes that are going to happen in the subject. And if you read the last line, what the subject is doing is it usually calls one of the methods of the observer in order to notify the change that has happened in the subject. And the last one is observer pattern is a way of notifying change to a number of classes. This is the definition of an observer pattern. Observer pattern is a way of notifying the change to a number of classes. Okay, so if you look at the need for observer pattern from this discussion, from the examples that we have seen, the post office example or the Twitter example or the YouTube example, I'm going to take an example of a weather forecast station here to demonstrate the observer pattern. And on daily basis we wanted to get weather updates. Some websites wanted to get weather updates. They will get registered for the weather updates from the weather forecast station, and individual users like you and me would want to get the weather update notifications or weather alerts, weather warnings, okay, those kind of things. Or some TV station is also registering for the weather updates, and a radio station will also get registered for the weather update. So that's the example that I'm going to take in order to demonstrate the observer pattern. So based on the examples that we have seen so far, if you look at this, when an object is dependent on other object, when you need many other objects to receive an update when the main object changes, then we go for observer pattern. Instead of periodically, the advantage here is instead of periodically checking to see if the object is changed or not, like cricket score updates, whenever cricket score changes or a stock price change. Okay, in such cases you might want to update the change to all the registered parties. So instead of periodically checking to see if the object is changed, you would only like to be notified when it gets changed. And look to the observer pattern when you do not know how many other classes or instances are monitoring the changes that are happening to your object. Then in such scenarios also we go for observer pattern. And the change in an object should send notification to other objects without any knowledge of them. Even in that scenario also we can go for a specialized version of observer pattern. Okay, and if you look at the class diagram, so you have a subject here. Okay, you have a subject here, and subject will provide the register methods for registering, unregistering, and notifying. You also have an observer here. Usually this will be an interface, and it has a notify method. All the concrete classes that you are going to implement, they will be implementing this interface. For example, I'm going to take an example where, so I define an interface called iObserver, which will have a notify method, and I'm going to create concrete classes like a user, or a TV station, or a radio station, or a government agency, and all of them would be implementing this interface, iObserver interface, which means each of these concrete classes will have the notify method. And then this subject will maintain the list of all these observers, and then whenever you call notify observer, it is going to loop through all the existing observer references that it has got, and it is going to call notify method on each of those instances of type iObserver. So the call will get resolved to the respective concrete object, and the code will get executed inside the respective concrete objects. Okay, so let's look at the example that I'm going to take. So this is the example. I'm going to implement a iObserver interface which has got a notify method, and I'm going to create individual classes, a user class, a government agency class, a radio station class, a TV channel class, and each of them will implement iObserver interface. So they will have a notify method, it's just that, and then you have a weather forecast station which is our subject now, and this will maintain the list of all the observers, and it is exposing methods like register, unregister, and notify observers. Let's look at the code sample. Okay, so the first one, so I have if you look at the structure, so I have 3 different folders: business logic, observer, and subject. If I look at observer, I have iObserver interface, and then inside that I am having notify method. Since I wanted to send the weather data from the subject to all the observers, I am passing this as an input parameter. So I have another class called weather data. This will hold the information about the illuminance, humidity, air pressure, latest temperature, max temperature, min temperature of the day, and forecast weather summary. Okay, so that is going to be as input parameter for this iObserver. And if you go and see each of them, for example, if you look at user, so user implements iObserver interface, and then the constructor, the public constructor, you can pass the name of the user, which will be maintained within this class, and then it has a notify method, and when you send the weather data, it is going to print it to the console. Okay, same is with TV channel. I have a TV channel, and I have this will also implement iObserver interface. It has a public constructor, and you can send the name of the TV channel here, and then notify method, it's just one and the same. A radio station, it implements iObserver interface, has a public constructor which will take the name of the radio station as an input parameter, and it has notify method. And the same with government agency, maybe agriculture department is interested in the weather forecast alerts, so it's just the same, and then it has got the notify method. Okay, so let me close all this and let me go and open the program. Now what do? We have not seen weather forecast, so we have not seen our subject yet. We only looked at our observers. So if you look at our subject, this is weather forecast service. Now I'm maintaining a list of iObserver collection, and then you can call register method, pass the observer, we will add it to the observers collection, and in unregistered method we will remove it from that list. And when we call notify observer, remember this notify observer, we loop through all the observer, we loop through each of the observer in the observer collection, and we call notify method. That's what we are doing here. Okay, and now let's look at our program. I created an instance of weather forecast service, and I also populated weather data which I will get from some satellite, and then I'm creating different users. I created one user with the name Kishore Verra, and I created another user with the name Prasantar Mai, and created a TV channel with the name TV9, a radio station with the name Big FM, and I created a government agency called Agriculture Department. In all these, each of them are called observer. Each of these instances is an observer, and weather service is a subject. Now we need to register each of these observers with the subject, for which we call dot register method of the subject, and we pass and we will register it. Once you register it, now you will be notifying all the observers. So when you say notify observers and data, the call would go to this method. Okay, and because you already registered, the observers collection will have all the observers, and it will iterate through that observers collection, and it will call notify. Since each of the concrete class is implementing iObserver interface, the call will get resolved to the respective concrete class, and finally the code inside the respective notify method will get executed. So I will put a breakpoint here. Okay, so we have created the subject, created weather data, created observers, registered them with the, or subscribed, each observer got subscribed with the subject, and then now we are calling notify observers. We go inside this, it has got there are 5 observers, 2 users, 1 TV channel, 1 radio station, and 1 government agency. And for each of them, when you call notify, now first one is user, it will go and call the notify method of the respective user. So I'm pressing F5. So this is how it would come now. Kishore Borra received weather alert. Name, I'm printing name, latest temperature, and all the weather data. Same with the second user, and then next the TV channel, next the radio station, and next the agriculture department. But if you see, there is some more here. What I did was, once that is done, I have unregistered user 1, means I have unregistered myself. That's why you will not see that user, because he got unregistered and he was removed from the respective collection. So you will not find that user, and you will find the remaining. So this is how the traditional version of observer pattern would work. Okay, now let's understand how do we do observer pattern with the help of delegates and events. So now we moved on to the next project, observer pattern 2, and here now let's go back to our subject. When you look at the subject, so you will find a delegate and you will find an event. So I defined a delegate called a notify delegate, which would take the weather data as the input argument, and I created an event of type notify delegate called notify event, and this is the event. And then now what I'm doing is, inside the notify observers, previously we are looping through, because previously in the subject we have the register, unregister, and all that, and then we are also maintaining the collection of all the observers. But now we don't do that. So simply what we do is we go and see if that event is not null. If it is not null, we go and file on notify event. Okay, and then what do we do in our observers? If you go to any of our observer, and I slightly changed the constructor, and I'm passing this subject, and then once the subject is passed to the observer, and I will get registered for the notify event, and I have wired up that event to this method, service notify event, and in which I get the weather data, and I can do whatever I wanted to do from there. Same with government agency. So it has a constructor in which a new second parameter has been added, and then now I'm getting registered for the notify event of the service method, and then I will write my business logic inside that event handler. Okay, same with you'll find same with TV channel as well as user. Okay, and if you go back and see, let me close all this. If you go back and see program, it's just the same. We create the subject, we create the weather data, and we create all the observers, but as a second parameter we pass the subject. Okay, once you pass the subject, what happens inside the constructor? When you pass the subject, we are getting registered for that event, and the business logic will be written here. Okay, and when we call notify observers on the subject, and I have already shown you the code, what we are doing, we are just firing the event. Okay, so now if I run this, so we created the subject, we created the data, and we created all the observers. Okay, now we are calling notify observers method on the service. Go inside and see what happens now. It is not null because all those observers, notify event is not null because all the observers in their constructors, they got registered for this event. So when I say on notify event data, so the first one, it goes to the user, okay, and then it goes to the second user, then it goes to the TV channel. So this is just like, you know, standard if you are a C# programmer or a VB.NET programmer, and if you are doing Windows WinForm development, then you know how the GUI controls will get wired up with the underlying events. I mean to say that GUI controls, they use events and delegates model to wire up to the GUI controls, to the event handlers. So it's just the same. Okay, now let's look at the last one. So in .NET Framework 4.0, in order to support the task parallel library mechanism, they have come up with iObservable and iObserver interfaces. So now let me set this as the startup project. So just the same, I have taken the same example, same weather data, no change. Okay, and the weather forecast service. So now weather forecast service is subject, and all these are observers. So now what happens is, if you go and look at any of the observer, I mark it as iObserver of weather data. Okay, when I mark it as, when I make this class implementing iObserver interface, okay, then I got to implement these three methods: on next, on error, on completed. Okay, so no change as far as this is considered, no change, and we just need to implement these three. So same with each of the observers, iObserver of weather data. Okay, and I just implemented the three methods. Go for government agency, just the same, iObserver of weather data. But interestingly, when you come to weather forecast service, it is iObservable. Hope you notice this. This is observable weather data. Okay, and then it will maintain the list of all observers. And we are going back to, since if you implement this iObservable interface, you got to implement subscribe method. So now subscribe method, so I have implemented subscribe method. Okay, and inside that, now since I have a collection, I am just adding it to the observers collection. The incoming observer is being added to observers collection. But if you look at the return type, it's disposable. So because of that reason, so I have written a class here, because I have to return an disposable object, so that when we are done, it will dispose that object. For that, what I did was I created another class called unsubscriber, which is implementing disposable. And here I'm maintaining if you look at the constructor of unsubscriber, every time I call this unsubscriber constructor, I pass all the list of observers that I have and the current observer. So this dot observers is the total observers, and this dot observer is the current observer that I am sending. And I'm maintaining lists here, private lists here. And then I call dispose, it calls dispose, and what we do is we will check whether the collection is not null and whether the collection contains the present observer, then it will go and remove it. So that line is being added here. That's all. And then we will write notify observers, and inside notify observers, what we do is we will loop through each of these observers. And then maybe because we know that each of those observers are implementing on completed, on next, and on error events. On next, on error, and on completed. And if you see, for this particular observer, on next means this is successful. I am just calling notify value, which means printing this. On error means I'm saying that there is some error, and on completed means I'm saying that whether update is completed. So now let's go back to forecast service. So what I'm doing is I'm looping through each of these observers collection, and I'm saying that if data is null, means there is no other data, I'm just sending the exception bad data. Otherwise I'm just calling on next, and then I'm saying on completed. That's it. And then if you go back to your program, there is no change, it's just the same. Create the subject, create the data, create observers, register each of these observers, and then go and call notify observers. So if I run this now, so here I will be having all the observers. So I go to on next. Yeah, it just goes on. So you get the same input. Okay. Okay, and one thing which I missed to discuss in the second one. So here, if I go back to the weather forecast service, we have only one delegate which would notify the weather data. For example, if I wanted to add one more delegate, I wanted to notify the bad weather alerts. Okay, so I can write like this. I can write one more delegate, something like this, the way I have written bad weather delegate and bad weather event. Some users, they might want to get registered for bad weather event, so I can do like this, bad weather event. Okay, so this user, so what we do here is, so if you go back to weather forecast service, whenever I am calling notify observers, maybe if data dot maximum temperature is greater than 35, and then I will notify on bad weather event. Okay, so if you go to the program.cs and okay, the maximum temperature is 37. So what happens is now we have implemented that in user class. So user is the one who got subscribed to the bad weather event. So if I run this, I get to see it twice. Hence, in conclusion, observer pattern is a way of notifying change to a number of classes, and we looked at three different flavors of observer pattern, namely the traditional observer pattern, and the one which can be implemented using delegates and events, and the one which can be implemented using iObservable and iObserver interfaces. I hope you find this session useful and use it in your own applications, and see you next time with a different topic. Bye bye.